You are listening to a cassette recording of a channeling session from the Raw Contact, a series of 106 sessions that were conducted between 1981 and 1984, using a form of tuned trance telepathy. Throughout these sessions, a group of entities identified as Ra shared information regarding the Law of One, spiritual evolution, and a variety of esoteric topics through a series of questions and answers. The full text transcript of these recorded sessions can be read for free at lnlresearch.org, where you can also learn more about this audio and its origins. This recording is intended for personal study and is not available for commercial use. Please contact LNL Research if you wish to use this audio in any other way. Raw number 67, August 15th, 1981.
And I greet you in the love and in the light of the one infinite Creator. I communicate now.
Could you first give us the instrument's condition, please?
I am the vital energies are more closely aligned with the amount of a distortion normal to this entity than previous asking showed. The physical and complex energy levels are somewhat less strong than at the previous asking. And the psychic attack component is exceptionally strong at this particular nexus.
Can you describe what you call the psychic attack component and tell me why it is strong at this particular time?
I am Ra. We shall elect not to retrace previously given information, but rather elect to note that the psychic attack upon this instrument is at a constant level as long as it continues in this particular service. Variations towards the distortion of intensity of attack occur due to the opportunities presented by the entity in any weakness at this particular nexus. The entity has been dealing with the distortion which you call pain for some time, as you call this measurement. And this has a cumulatively weakening effect upon physical energy levels. This creates a particularly favorable target of opportunity, and the entity of which we have previously spoken has taken this opportunity to attempt to be of service in its own way. It is fortunate for the ongoing vitality of this contact that the instrument is a strong-willed entity with little tendency towards the distortion called among your people's hysteria, since the dizzying effects of this attack have been a constant and at times disruptive for several of your diurnal periods. However, this particular entity is adapting well to the situation without undue distortions towards fear. Thus, the psychic attack is not successful, but does have some deraining influence upon the instrument.
I'll ask if I'm correct in this analysis that we would consider that the entity making this so-called attack is offering its service with respect to its distortion in our polarized condition now, so that we may more fully appreciate its polarity. And we are appreciative and thank this entity for its attempt to serve our one Creator in bringing to us knowledge in, shall I say, a more complete sense. Is this correct?
I am Ra. There is no correctness or incorrectness to your statement. It is an expression of a positively polarized and balanced view of negatively polarized actions, which has the effect of debilitating the strength of the negatively polarized actions.
We would welcome the services of the entity who uses, and I will use the misnomer, you might say, of attack, since I do not consider this an attack, but an offering of service. And we welcome this offering of service, but we would be able, I believe, to make more full use of the service if it were not physically disabling the instrument in a manner way. For with a greater physical ability, she would be able to more appreciate the service. We would greatly appreciate it if the service was carried on in some manner which we could welcome in even greater love than at present. This, I assume, would be some service that would not include the dizzying effect. Trying to understand the mechanism of this service by the entity that seems to be constantly with us. And I am trying to understand the origin of this entity and his mechanism of greeting us. And will make a statement that is probably not only incorrect, but is a function of my extreme limitation in understanding the other densities and how they work. But I'm guessing that this particular entity is a member of the Orion Confederation and is possibly, or possibly not, incarnate in a body of the appropriate density, which I assume is the fifth. And by mental discipline, he has been able to project a portion, if not all of his consciousness, into our coordinates, you might say here. and is possibly one of the 7 bodies that make up his mind-body-spirit complex. Is any of this correct? Can you tell me what's correct or incorrect about that statement?
I am Ra. The statement is substantially correct.
Is it, would you rather not give me information as to the specifics of my statement?
I am Ra. We did not perceive a query in further detail. Please re-question.
Which body, as with respect to the callers, does the entity use to travel to us?
I am Ra. This query is not particularly simple to answer due to the transdimensional nature not only of space-time to time-space, but from density to density. The time-space, light, or fifth density body is used while the space-time fifth density body remains in a fifth density. The assumption that the consciousness is projected thereby is correct. The assumption that this conscious vehicle attached to the space-time fifth density of physical complex is that vehicle which works in this particular service is correct.
Then I undoubtedly will ask several very uninformed or questions. However, I'm just trying to understand certain concepts having to do with the illusion, I shall say, of the polarization that seems to exist at certain density levels in creation, and how in the mechanism of interaction of consciousness, it is a very difficult subject for me, and therefore I ask your forgiveness from that for questions. But it seems to me that fifth density entity is attracted in some way to our group by polarization of this group, which acts somehow as a beacon to the entity. Am I correct?
I am Ra. this is in substance correct, but the efforts of this entity are put forward only reluctantly. The usual attempts upon positively oriented entities or groups of entities are made, as we have said, by minions of the fifth density Orion leaders. These are a fourth density. The normal gambit of such a fourth density attack is the tempting of the entity or group of entities away from a total polarization towards service to others and toward the aggrandizement of self or of social organizations with which the self identifies. In the case of this particular group, each was given a full range of temptations to cease being of service to each other and to the one infinite Creator. Each entity declined these choices and instead continued with no significant deviations from the desire for a purely other self service orientation. At this point, one of the fifth density entities overseeing such detuning processes determined that it would be necessary to terminate the group by what you might call a magical means as you understand a ritual magic. We have previously discussed the potential for the removal of one of this group by such attack, and have noted that by far the most vulnerable is the instrument due to its a pre-incarnative, a physical, a complex distortions.
In order for this group to be fully in service to the Creator, since we recognize this fifth density entity as the Creator, we must also attempt to serve in any way we can this entity. Is it possible for you to communicate to us the desires of this entity in if there are any addition to simply ceasing the reception and dissemination of that which you provide for us?
I am Ra. This entity has two desires. The first and foremost is to, shall we say, misplace one or more of this group in a negative orientation, so that it may choose to be of service along the path of service to self. The objective which must precede this is the termination of the physical complex viability of one of this group, while the mind, body, spirit complex is within a controllable configuration. May we say that although we of Ra have a limited understanding, it is our belief that sending this entity love and light, which each of the group is doing, is the most helpful catalyst which the group may offer to this entity.
We find that, I'm sorry, if you continue, if you wish to continue, go ahead.
I am Ra. We were about to note that this entity has been as neutralized as possible in our estimation by this love offering, and thus its continued presence is perhaps the understandable limit for each polarity of the various views of service which each may render to the other.
We have a paradoxical situation in that in order to fully serve the Creator at this level, in the polarized section, you might say, of the creation, we have requests from those whom we serve in this density for Ra's information. In fact, I just had one by telephone a short while ago. However, we have requests from, in this particular case, another density, not to disseminate this information. We have the Creator, in fact, requesting two seemingly opposite activities of this group. It would be very helpful if we could reach a condition of full, total, complete service in such a way that we were every thought and activity serving the Creator to the very best of our ability. Is it possible for you to solve, or possible for the fifth density entity who offers its service to solve the paradox that I have observed?
I am Ra. It is quite possible.
Then how could we solve this paradox?
I am Ra. Consider, if you will, that you have no ability not to serve the Creator, since all is the Creator. In your individual growth patterns appear the basic third density choice. Further, there are overlaid memories of the positive polarizations of your home density. Thus, your particular orientation is strongly polarized towards service to others and has attained a wisdom as well as compassion. You do not have merely two opposite requests for service. You will find an infinite array of contradictory requests for information or lack of information from this source. If you listen carefully to those whose voices you may hear. This is all one voice to which you resonate upon a certain frequency. This frequency determines your choice of service to the one Creator. As it happens, this group's vibratory patterns and those of Ra are compatible and enable us to speak through this instrument with your support. This is a function of free will. A portion, seemingly, of the Creator rejoices at your choice to question us regarding the evolution of spirit. A seemingly separate portion would wish for multitudinous answers to a great range of queries of a specific nature. Another seemingly separate group of your peoples would wish this correspondence through this instrument to cease feeling it to be of a negative nature. Upon the many other planes of existence, there are those whose every fiber rejoices at your service, and those such as the entity of whom you have been speaking, which wish only to terminate the life upon the third density plane of this instrument. All are the Creator. There is one vast panoply of biases and distortions, colors and hues in an unending pattern. In the case of those with whom you as entities and as a group are not in a resonance, you wish them love, light, peace, joy, and bid them well. No more than this can you do for your portion of the Creator is as it is, and your experience and offering of experience to be valuable needs be more and more a perfect representation of who you truly are. Could you then serve a negative entity by offering the instrument's life? It is unlikely that you would find this a true service. Thus, you may see in many cases the loving balance of being achieved, the love of being offered, light of being sent, of being rejected as not being useful in your a journey at this time. Thus, you serve one Creator without paradox.
This particular entity is able to create with its service a dizzying effect on the instrument. Could you describe the mechanics of such a service?
I am Ra. This instrument in the small times of its incarnation had the distortion in the area of the otic complex of many infections which caused a great difficulties at this small age, as you would call it. The scars of these distortions remain, and indeed that which you call the sinus system remains distorted. Thus, the entity works with these distortions to produce a loss of the balance and a slight lack of ability to use the optic apparatus.
I was wondering about the magical, shall I say, principles behind the fifth density entity giving this service and his ability to give it. Why is he able to utilize these particular physical distortions from a philosophical or magical point of view?
I am Ra. This entity is able to, shall we say, penetrate in time-space configuration the field of this particular entity. It has moved through the quarantine without any vehicle, and thus has been more able to escape detection by the net of the guardians. This is the great a virtue of the magical working whereby consciousness is sent forth essentially without a vehicle as light. The light would work instantly upon an untuned individual by suggestion. That is the stepping out in front of the traffic, because the suggestion is that there is no traffic. This entity, as each in this group, is enough disciplined in the ways of love and light that it is not suggestible to any great extent. However, there is a predisposition of the physical complex which this entity is making maximal use of as regards the instrument, hoping, for instance, by means of increasing the dizziness, to cause the instrument to fall or to indeed walk in front of your traffic because of impaired vision. The magical principles, shall we say, may be loosely translated into your system of a magic whereby symbols are used and traced and visualized in order to develop the power of the light.
Do you mean that this fifth density entity visualizes certain symbols? I'm assuming these symbols are of a nature where their continued use would have some power or charge. Am I correct?
I am Ra. You are correct. In fifth density, light is as visible a tool as your pencils are writing.
Then, am I correct that assuming this entity configures the light into symbology, that is what we would call a physical presence? Is this correct?
I am Ra. This is incorrect. The light is used to create a sufficient purity of environment for the entity to place its consciousness in a carefully created light vehicle, which then uses the tools of light to do its working. The will and presence are those of the entity doing the working.
Are you familiar with a book that the instrument and I wrote approximately 12 years ago called The Crucifixion of Esmeralda Sweetwater? In particular, the banishing ritual used to bring the entities to Earth.
I am Ra. This is correct.
Were there any incorrectnesses in our writing with respect to the way this was performed?
I am Ra. The incorrectnesses occurred only due to the difficulty an author would have in describing the length of training necessary to enable the ones known in that particular writing as a Theodore and a Pablo in the necessary disciplines.
It has seemed to me that that book has somehow, in its entirety, been linked to many of those whom we have met since we wrote it, and to the many of the activities we have experienced. Is this correct?
I am wrong. This is quite so.
I will ask about that in a later session, since I don't want to get off the track, because it has something to do with the mechanics of time, which I'm very puzzled about. But I would ask then, in the fifth density entity, in coming here to offer its services, you mentioned penetrated the quarantine. Was this done through one of the windows, or was this because of his, shall I say, magical ability?
I am wrong. This was done through a very slight window, which less magically oriented entities or groups could not have used to advantage.
Now, the main point of this line of questioning has to do with the first distortion and the fact that this window existed. Was this, shall I say, a portion of the random window effect, and are we experiencing the same type of balancing in receiving the offerings of this entity as the planet in general receives because of the window effect?
I am wrong. This is precisely correct, as the planetary sphere accepts more highly evolved positive entities or groups with information to offer. The same opportunity must be offered to similarly wise, negatively oriented entities or groups.
Then we experience in this seeming difficulty what I would call effect of the wisdom of the first distortion, and for that reason must fully accept the wisdom of that which we experience. This is my personal view. Is it congruent with Ross?
I am Ra. In our view, we would perhaps go further in expressing appreciation of this opportunity. This is an intensive opportunity in that it is quite marked in its effects, both actual and potential, and as it affects the instruments, distortions towards pain and other difficulties such as the dizziness. It enables the instrument to continuously choose to serve others and to serve the Creator. Similarly, it offers a continual opportunity for each in the group to express support under more distorted or difficult circumstances of the other self experiencing the brunt, shall we say, of this attack, thus being able to demonstrate the love and light of the infinite Creator, and furthermore choosing working to continue to serve as messengers for this information which we attempt to offer, and to serve the Creator thereby. Thus, the opportunities are quite noticeable, as well as the distortions caused by this circumstance.
Thank you. Is this so-called attack offered to myself and Jim as well as the instrument?
I am Ra. This is correct.
I personally have felt no effect that I am aware of. Is it possible for you to tell me how we are offered this service?
I am Ra. The questioner has been offered the service of doubting the self and of becoming disheartened over various distortions of the personal nature. This entity has not chosen to use these opportunities, and the Orion entity has basically ceased to be interested in maintaining constant surveillance of this entity. The scribe is under a constant surveillance and has been offered numerous opportunities for the intensification of the mental, emotional distortions, and in some cases the connection matrices between mental, emotional complexes and the physical complex counterpart. As this entity has become aware of these attacks, it has become much less pervious to them. This is the particular cause of the great intensification and constancy of the surveillance of the instrument, for it is the weak link due to factors beyond its control within this incarnation.
Is it within the first distortion to tell me why the instrument experienced so many physical distortions during the new times of its incarnation?
I am Ra. This is correct.
In that case, can you answer me as to why the instrument experienced so much during its early years?
I am Ra. We were affirming the correctness of your assumption that such answers would be breaking the way of confusion. It is not appropriate for such answers to be laid out as a table spread for dinner. It is appropriate that the complexes of opportunity involved be contemplated.
Then there is no other service that we can at this time offer that fifth density entity of the Orion group, who is so constantly with us. As I see it now, there's nothing that we can do for him from your point of view. Is this correct?
I am Ra. This is correct. There is great humor in your attempt to be of polarized service to the opposite polarity. There is a natural difficulty in doing so, since what you consider service is considered by this entity non-service. As you send this entity love and light and wish it well, it loses its polarity and needs to regroup. Thus, it would not consider your service as such. On the other hand, if you allowed it to be of service by removing this instrument from your midst, you might perhaps perceive this as not being of service. You have here a balanced and polarized view of the Creator. Two services offered, mutually rejected, and in a state of equilibrium in which free will is preserved and each allowed to go upon its own path of experiencing the one infinite Creator.
Thank you. Well, in closing that part of the discussion, I will just say that if there's anything that we can do that is within our ability, and I understand that there are many things, like the ones you just mentioned, that are not within our ability that we could do for this particular entity, you would, in the future, communicate its requests to us. We will at least consider them, because we would like to serve in every respect. Is this agreeable to you?
I am Ra. We perceive that we have not been able to clarify your service versus its desire for service. You need, in our humble opinion, to look at the humor of the situation and relinquish your desire to serve where no service is requested. The magnet will attract or repel. Glory in the strength of your polarization and allow others of opposite polarity to similarly do so. Seeing the great humor of this polarity and its complications in view of the unification in sixth density of these two paths.
Thank you very much. I have a statement here that I would quickly read and have you comment on the accuracy or inaccuracy. In general, the archetypical mind is a representation of the facets of the one infinite creation. The father archetype corresponds to the male or positive aspect of electromagnetic energy and is active, creative, and radiant, as is our local sun. The mother archetype corresponds to the female or negative aspect of electromagnetic energy and is receptive or magnetic, as is our earth, as it receives the sun's rays and brings forth life via third density fertility. The prodigal son or fool archetype corresponds to every entity who seems to have strayed from unity and seeks to return to the one infinite creator. The devil archetype represents the illusion of the material world and the appearance of evil, but is more accurately the provider of catalyst for the growth of each entity within the third density illusion. Magician, saint, healer, or adept corresponds to the higher self, and because of the balance within its energy centers pierces the illusion to contact intelligent infinity and thereby demonstrates mastery of the catalyst of third density. The archetype of death symbolizes the transition of an entity from the yellow ray body to the green ray body, either temporarily between incarnations or more permanently at harvest. Each archetype presents an aspect of the one infinite creation to teach the individual mind-body-spirit complex according to the calling or the electromagnetic configuration of mind of the entity. Teaching is done via the intuition. With proper seeking or mind configuration, the power of will uses the spirit as a shuttle to contact the appropriate archetypical aspect necessary for the teach learning. In the same way, each of the other informers of intuition are contacted. They are hierarchical and proceed from the entity's own subconscious mind to group or planetary mind to God to higher self to archetypal mind to cosmic mind or intelligent infinity. Each is contacted by the spirit serving as shuttle according to the harmonized electromagnetic configuration of the seeker's mind and the information sought. Would you please comment on the accuracy of these observations and correct any errors or fill in any omissions?
I am Ra. The entity has been using a transferred energy for most of this session due to its depleted physical levels. We shall begin this rather complex answer, which is interesting, but do not expect to finish it. Those portions which we do not respond to, we ask that you re-question us upon at a working in your future.
Perhaps it would be better to start the next session with the answer to this question. Would that be appropriate, or is the energy already fixed?
I am Ra. The energy is, as always, allotted. The choice, as always, is yours.
In that case, continue.
I am Ra. Perhaps the first item which we shall address is the concept of the spirit used as a shuttle between the roots and the trunk of mind. This is a misapprehension, and we shall allow the questioner to consider the function of the spirit further. For in working with the mind, we are working within one complex and have not yet attempted to penetrate intelligent infinity. It is well said that archetypes are portions of the one infinite creator, or aspects of its face. It is, however, far better to realize that the archetypes, while a constant in the complex of generative energies offered, do not give the same yield of these complexes to any two seekers. Each seeker will experience each archetype in the characteristics within the complex of the archetype, which are most important to it. An example of this would be the observation of the questioner that the fool is described in such and such a way. One great aspect of this archetype is the aspect of faith, the walking into space without a regard for what is to come next. This is, of course, foolish, but is part of the characteristic of the spiritual neophyte, that this aspect was not seen may be pondered by the questioner. At this time, we shall again request that the query be restated at the next working, and we shall at this time cease using this instrument. Before we leave, may we ask if there may be any short questions?
Only if there's anything we can do to make the instrument more comfortable or improve the contact.
I am Ra. Continue, my friends, in the strength of harmony, love, and light. All is well. The alignments are appreciated for their careful placement. I am Ra. I leave you now, my friends, in the glory of the love and the light of the infinite Creator. Go forth then, rejoicing in the power and the peace of the one infinite Creator. Adonai.
All right. All right. All right. All right.
Mm-hmm.
There you go.
Okay.